Let's start off with the Bloodline Civil War. Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa against the Usos, and what is coming out of this? What is the logical way of where you want to set up SummerSlam?
So again, I thought tonight they did a great job of making us believe that the Usos have a chance of actually pitting Roman Reigns. Like the way that they were setting up in their promos, you might possibly see Roman get pinned for the first time in 3 years. And because this is not for a championship match, because it's not really for any championship, I think that presents a very real possibility here that Roman could be the one to get pinned, especially if Solo, is kind of on the brink of possibly turning on him too. I don't think that'll happen. I think in the end, I still see Reigns coming out on top because he took such a beating tonight. I think tomorrow he still wins, and you continue that chase for the Usos to try to continue to take down this tribal chief.
I think the most effective finish is Jay just pinning him to set up SummerSlam. If they feel the need to protect Roman in that sense, that they are going to keep it sacred, whoever gets to beat this guy. I think the alternative finish is he just murders Jimmy to the point that Jimmy is like written off for a time and Jay is left to defend his brother. And Jimmy takes such a beating that you're right. Like Roman is up against the ropes and we're thinking this is going to be the demise. And instead he comes back with a savage beating of Jimmy and gives that fuel for Jay. I could see them doing that as the alternative.
I like that idea a lot. Or just anything, because you're left wondering, okay, Jay versus Roman feels like a good direction for a singles match at SummerSlam. But how do you get to Jay instead of Jimmy? What's the justification that Jimmy wouldn't be the one going for the championship? And I think using Jimmy is sort of like, your sacrifice to further heat up Jay wanting to get revenge. I think that's a great idea. So there's going to be, as usual with the Bloodline matches, a lot of storytelling, live theater that'll likely take place in the body of this match. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Seth Rollins versus Finn Balor for the World Heavyweight Championship. I don't know if anyone is expecting Finn Balor to win, but I am expecting this to be a hell of a match between these two. And again, the crowd will be a consistent point that we bring up, that it's this crowd can take a great match and make it a memorable one.
Yeah, there's no doubt the Bloodline match will be probably the most memorable, maybe even the most talked about and most dramatic. But bell to bell, I think you can, the Money in the Bank matches should be great too, but at least maybe from a pure wrestling standpoint, without any other gimmicks attached to it, this can absolutely steal the show. I think you're almost guaranteeing, something 4 stars and above between these two. And we'll see, like if there's any sort of significant character change, maybe. I'm very curious to see how London reacts to Finn Balor. He's like at least a home territory person, I suppose you could say. But at the same time, Seth Rollins is incredibly beloved. I imagine they'll be singing his song throughout the entire thing, and I don't see the crowd turning on him whatsoever.
Yeah, this has a chance to be the match of the show, and there are some contenders for that spot. Cody Rhodes against Dominic Mysterio, with the added note that PWInsider.com has reported that this is scheduled to be the main event on Saturday.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Which, I mean, it opens up the idea that you end this with an angle, like a Brock shows up to set up SummerSlam. Like, obviously, there would be a storyline reason if this is going to go on last.
Yeah, I mean, of all the choices you have on the show, I'd be a little surprised if this somehow got top billing, even with the big closing angle, like between Money in the Bank, and if not that, then certainly the Usos versus Roman. I mean, maybe the justification is that okay, like Roman goes through this war, do they want to leave him open to be cashed in on, or at least like have people asking why isn't somebody cashing in on him? Maybe. So what? So where would the Bloodline match go?
I don't know where you put it. I don't know if it necessarily matters where you put it if it's not going on last. I think it's unless you're putting them on like early before the men's ladder match.
Does it
you're going to have that tease.
Right. Yeah. Does it start the show even? Yeah, maybe.
It's an odd placement, but sometimes they like to do odd things with the opener. That's a weird one to imagine, but I mean, it eliminates then the Money in the Bank cloud over top the match.
And I suppose if you want a match that's guaranteed to elicit a reaction even after everything that people have seen, I mean, putting Dominic in there, people are going to still go crazy, even if it's at the end of the night.
In terms of the match, like, is that a way, does that further the chance that like Dominic gets the fluke win and it's something he gets to hold over Cody? Or do you feel they do not have that? They are not going to put Cody in that position because they are ultra protective of Cody.
Right. So assuming we're getting to Brock versus Cody again at SummerSlam, they could have Dominic win via Brock and, still get to, but then like, is that another sort of loose end that Cody has to tie up before? Like, does that set up
this guy needs loose ends? Like, we're talking about like Mania. So,
but how many loose ends can a guy have? Like, we're already supposed to be still focused on him telling the story. Brock is already a detour. Now,
Brock would, in theory, be done at SummerSlam.
Right. And then he's going to have to go back and get revenge over Dominic as sort of like a follow-up to that. Yeah, I don't know. Again,
he's not going to Roman in like September or October.
Yeah, I understand. But a rematch against Dominic does not feel like that juicy, I'll say. And are we at the point now where, Cody lost to Brock last time, right?
They're 1-1.
Did he lose the latest one?
He lost the last one. And
maybe for that reason, I just see them giving like Cody a win over Dominic here.
Yeah, it's possible. It could also be like, if you have Brock, it's also the way for Dominic to just be the annoying heel that can brag about this, and then finally he gets his comeuppance once Cody is done with Brock. So it gives you that option. Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler against Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez. I just expect a title defense, and hopefully like Liv is ready to return and they can have a decent enough match, but I don't know what to expect with this one. I would not say, yeah, it could surprise, but we'll see.
Yeah. This is a division that sorely needs teams, and like Rousey and Baszler are burning through them incredibly quickly. So are we just going to have, a successful title defense from Ronda and Shayna? And then what? Like
Lash Legend and Jakara Jackson on NXT have called them out. That's like, the big one.
You can't necessarily justify Liv and Raquel sticking together, after this. And to what point? Like, there's no more momentum, for the two of them. So, of course, I don't expect a title change for this one, but do we get a turn on the babyface side? Do we finally get Raquel turning coming off of this?
Or do we find out that Raquel didn't call or text Liv while she was hurt?
Gotta text.
You better contact your partner if they're hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make them come back and have to find out that there are no messages were left for them over that period.
Even a Facebook Messenger note, just Instagram DM, just something to show that you care about your injured friend.
I'd have a lot of people turn on me, people I don't get back to. I'd have a lot of heel turns coming my way. Maybe that makes me the heel in the grand scheme of things if I don't get back to people. Okay, and then the ladder matches. Let's start off with the women. Zelina Vega, Becky Lynch, Zoe Stark, Bayley, Io Sky, and Trish Stratus. The more I look at this one, I feel for sure that, well, I shouldn't say for sure in any of these. Historically, Money in the Bank has been the matches where the winners have just jumped all over the place. And like writers have talked about like where like the day of just change of directions, change of plans. Drew McIntyre just did an interview this week. Like up until 8:00 when the show was starting, he was supposed to win. And then it went to Kane. So with Vince McMahon more and more in the trenches, these are matches that like literally you can't give any kind of strong logic that this is how it's got to go, because I think, a change of just one person's thought could change the outcome here. But I will say, based on what I would think would be the most effective, I think Trish and Becky kind of cancel each other out. I don't think they need the briefcase. And by extension, I think not a zero chance, but a lower chance with Zoe, since she's wrapped up in all of that. And with the remaining people, it's more why I still feel Io, she's the favorite and should be the favorite in this.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Like as far as who I think will benefit the most from having the briefcase, I really do think it's Io in this case. I don't think you can completely discount Trish perhaps as somebody, who's a heel, who I think would, have that extra level of legitimacy attached to her if she's able to have a Money in the Bank along with the Zoe Stark by her side. And maybe they're planning for a Trish versus Rhea match, or maybe somehow Becky beats Rhea and then you could build to Trish and Becky that way for the championship. I wouldn't completely discount her, but I also don't think they need the championship for their particular feud. Whereas Io, coming off of that Puerto Rico show, it really does feel like she's on the cusp of like stardom, no pun intended, but she can really use that extra boost to kind of take her over the top and put, and I think she'll run with the spotlight, and the crowd wants to see her put into that spotlight. Tonight wasn't really like a big segment for her to like get some sort of overwhelming reaction, but I feel like by the time she makes that first climb, they set the scene for her to actually win the championship. I think London will react well, but we'll see.
And then the men's match, Ricochet, Shinsuke Nakamura, LA Knight, Santos Escobar, Butch, Damian Priest, and Logan Paul, which sounds like this could be an outstanding match with the 7 involved. You've got Ricochet and Logan Paul that I think will have plenty of ideas to throw around. It's a big match for Santos Escobar. For LA Knight, I think he's going to be the biggest babyface in this match. And we'll see how Nakamura fits in as well here. But I have high hopes for this one. I think the most value is on Logan Paul, and I think LA Knight gains as much, if not more, by coming close and the audience wanting him so badly to win, but getting deprived. But he still comes out of this as the guy who came so close, but he has won over the crowd, and that's sort of his victory coming out of this, because I just see a whole lot more to play with a Logan Paul than I do LA Knight, who to me, like, the ceiling is just getting over as this great talker that's got the crowd that I don't think needs to be in the championship picture.
I agree. I mean, we've kind of talked a whole lot about, like, in the past, about how they really fluked into that Bryan Danielson run by, not booking him strong at all, and ultimately getting the crowd to want to see him book strong even more. Same with, like, I don't know, like a Kofi Mania or something like that. I could see people making a similar argument here, but I do feel like this is a case where LA Knight benefits more from not winning the Money in the Bank. And, instead gaining a whole lot of that audience momentum to want to see him get pushed more. That's his gimmick now. He's a guy who overachieves what's been given to him. And I think that'll only, if he's booked to not win this one, it only furthers that narrative that, he will overachieve whatever you give him. That said, if this match did not have a Logan Paul in it, I think I might go with LA Knight. But because you have a Logan Paul who's, I think, the perfect type of heel to run with the gimmick, somebody who you can, make involved in your title picture without necessarily him being there every single week. If he's holding this briefcase, somebody you can give, this like social media value, mainstream attention value by having a Money in the Bank briefcase attached to him for all of his other appearances. He really is, I think, a perfect choice for this gimmick. And add to the fact that, he's a great high flyer for this match as well. So expect a great spot with him and Ricochet, I would assume. But he's still my pick. He's been my favorite ever since he was announced. What about Damian Priest? I don't know if he's necessarily a favorite for either of us, but what do you expect him to gain from this particular match?
I mean, if circumstances were different and you believed that, like, Finn Balor had a title run in him, I think that's really interesting and plays off of the tension that they've had in the weeks leading up, that you could have that scenario where you have, I mean, think about it, like in a opposite situation where Judgment Day comes out of this with a win over Cody, the women's title, the Money in the Bank, and a world title. Like that's a great story for Judgment Day and all the different things. I just don't see that happening. So for that reason, I don't see Damian Priest winning it, although you could argue that of the regular everyday performers in this match, like, I throw out Logan Paul as like your regular that you have every week. Like, Damian Priest is your strongest book guy here, I would say, above Santos Escobar. That, I for that reason, I don't think he really needs it, because I see him at a certain level, and I don't know if this brings him any higher than he already is. Like, he's already a pretty prominent heel on Raw.
But to justify him not winning, they're gonna have to come up with something, pretty creative to suggest why the overall, like, Priest should be the favorite if we're just talking about a kayfabe, type of wrestling, sort of betting odds, right? So I'm just wondering how they might possibly tie this back into the whole Finn Balor, feud that they've been kind of setting up between the two Judgment Day members. Does he try to come out to try to help Damian Priest and ultimately cost him the actual briefcase itself?
Maybe he sends out JD McDonough to try and help, and he screws up.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting.
Since Balor's wrapped up, he sends out someone he's on Damian Priest duty.
And you would expect JD to get a pretty good reaction if he makes that sort of cold, appearance here.
So there's different ways to go. I'm looking forward to that men's ladder match. I'm looking forward to the show overall. Oh, and we have Gunther and Matt Riddle for the Intercontinental title as well, which should be, again, another like really strong match on the show that I think this one gets time. I just don't see Riddle as a very viable challenger to the audience. But, you have history of these two with progress that I think this audience will be, aware of the history of these two more than most audiences. And I think you'll get a pretty entertaining 15 minutes of these two, regardless of your believability of Gunther losing the title here. It's just going to be a entertaining match.
It's a strong Gunther showcase, or a strong Matt Riddle showcase for that matter. Every show, Clash of the Castle certainly was helped by just having a real banger of a match between, Gunther and Sheamus, and maybe expect them to replicate a similar feeling coming out of this match.
Do you see, besides Brock Lesnar, could you see a Drew McIntyre returning on this show?
For what setting, though? Sheamus isn't even on this, so I guess he might come out at the end of this Gunther match to challenge Gunther.
Which Drew is on Raw, Sheamus is on SmackDown now.
Yes,
right. So right. Drew could
Drew's
get
on Raw.
Drew is on Raw. Drew was moved to Raw, as I recall.
Okay.
Because they had all the baby faces. I could certainly see Drew at some point becoming a heel, if not outright, when he returns, because they do have several baby faces set up on Raw. It just seems like it would be a natural. This crowd would be a pretty hot crowd to bring him back in. But it also could be held off as well.
Yeah, it's possible.
All right. So yes, we will be live as soon as the show ends. So flip on over to youtube.com/postwrestling. We will now take your calls. So if you want to jump into the StreamYard room, you can. And we also have feedback